Hello and welcome to the show. Now, Forza 6 has many fantastic real-world racing circuits. Circuits that were designed to have the cars racing around them in a specific way. But what happens when we go racing around them in the opposite direction? Of course, not only do we have to worry about the likes of the infamous corkscrew being from different angles, braking zones for corners are going to be completely different, and you're not going to have markers and necessarily know quite where to get the car slowed down. Also, you've got to worry about corners often going to have now tightening radius as opposed to widening radius, as you're approaching them from a completely different angle. We grabbed a field of B-class cars to see how we would all fare. Now for the, because of course Forza doesn't want you to be racing in reverse, for the first race we were trying a slightly different starting technique of basically get going, spin your car around as quick as you can, and then launch. It kind of worked. About half the field sort of got the cars off the line, got it off cleanly. It was a little bit chaotic in places. It did kind of work for getting everybody off of the line, and then everything is pretty much new to us. You're never quite sure on this, especially on this opening lap, quite what lines you want to be taking through the corners. A little bit of guesswork was going on with the braking zones and the corkscrew for the first time. Everyone was taking horribly shonky lines because you just simply weren't quite ready. I was amazed how well the replay cameras did with all of this. There's only a couple of places where it goes wrong. Here it's looking backwards from the car instead of looking forward. I dropped to fourth, although everyone had problems. Good Aston Martin in the wall, just trying to get the car slowed down. Again, no one was quite sure where to brake. I did manage to get my Mustang slowed down. I got to the inside of a Skyline, and Pretz thought he could take a lot more speed than he could and couldn't, and this was that's the other slight replay camera glitch going on there as well. And that's very easy to do with these corners when you're trying to judge braking and how much speed you can get away, because you have a relatively wide turn-in and the corner tightens up as you go through it. But my Mustang was to the lead at this stage of the race. It's a very odd experience as we head up towards what is now the final corner of Laguna Seca, because it's a familiar track yet completely and utterly different in many respects. One vehicle that was making its way up through the order very impressively, a Range Rover Sport SVR, coming around the final corner, is quicker than a Mercedes in a straight line. The Range Rover would get the position, but now we're at full racing speed coming down towards the new and very tight turn one. You got to try and get the car stopped. Mercedes almost locks the rear and very nearly has a big moment into that corner. The Hyundai does manage to just about pull it up in time as well. Range Rover was spot on in the background. I think there was a Lexus ended up in the sand trap, but on the most part we'd actually made it just about work getting the cars slowed down. There was plenty of fighting going on through the field, and of course overtaking spots were now quite different, and just sort of trying to find the optimum line, I should say. People were taking all sorts of slightly different lines, trying to figure out where they could get speed and certainly where they could get overtakes done. The Datsun here coming under fire from an Aston Martin. The Aston managing to get to the inside of the final corner. And of course, this is still you're trying to learn the braking zones for these corners and quite how much speed you can get away with taking through some of the turns. We saw the Datsun wheel on the dirt is what allowed the Aston Martin to catch up. Now the big stop down towards the new turn one, and the Mercedes has done a little bit of exploring, as does a Ferrari doing a big oversteering moment out in the sand. The Datsun is still fighting away with the Aston Martin. It's on the outside of the Mercedes through these next corners. I mean, these corners are not particularly easy to overtake on, to go side by side through normally, let alone when you're going from this direction. The Datsun does just about get the move done on the Mercedes. Mercedes going for a cutback, and RX-8 is coming to join in. Hyundai's gone exploring up the corkscrew. Datsun's trying to get to the inside, gets a little bit blocked by the Hyundai as we run down this straight. I do quite like the camera angle looking back when there's plenty of cars behind. It's an interesting viewpoint, and now people were just about getting the hang. It only took a couple of laps for the most cars to be acclimatized to this circuit. Still, mistakes were easier to make here, as the Hyundai and Aston Martin, and I think another car in the background, both end up running wide out of the same corner. Datsun coming under fire from the Mazda, but not quite any space to get past there. Towards the front, it was a little bit more spread out. Further up, this Skyline was very, very quick in a straight line. Breezes past the Subaru down here, but got to try and get it stopped. The Subaru a little bit braver, under braking into our now new first corner, and would get the move done back on the Skyline. These are just general B-class cars, so not only we got to sort of get used to the track in a different direction, but some of the cars were stronger and weaker at, different parts of the circuit. Skyline very quick in a straight line, but not as good through the corners. The Hemi Cuda wandering out a little bit wide. Skyline tries to get past. Subaru tries to make it 3 wide as we run up through the corkscrew the wrong way. The Skyline just kind of brushes itself across the nose of the Plymouth. Very nearly gets himself in trouble, but does get the move done. The muscle car has more straight line speed than the Impreza, but the Skyline stuck a wheel on the dirt and could not get the car stopped at that particular corner. That was probably one of the largest areas we were seeing mistakes, and the Skyline would come under fire and Volvo would get past. Yeah, that particular corner we did see a fair number of cars off in the wall. The midfield pack was massive in this one, and they were very much fighting over every possible position as a muscle car was out wide at the final turn. This BMW coming under fire from a Ferrari Testarossa. The kind of kink on the straight is kind of quite a lot better running in this direction because you're not going anywhere near as fast. You don't have the cars kind of lifting up and getting any airborne time. Ferrari went for a big dive, but couldn't quite make it stop, because when you're racing in traffic, you're trying to go for overtakes. People a little bit braver, try and push the car that little bit more, and that is when you do have the outbraking maneuvers. Lexus at the front of this group trying to hold off the Chevy. The BMW coming, King Cobra was joining in the fun. Another Lexus was holding on to this group. We went up the corkscrew. The M3 tries to get a move done, can't quite get it alongside, and is going to lack the straight line speed of the muscle car. Coming down this next straight, the Ferrari is right back in the fight despite his little off down at the first corner. This lot just about make it through. Lexus had a little bit of an off on the dirt. BMW closing and closing on that Chevy. Has a look up the inside. This is a really odd corner to go for an overtake on, but it can work. It was working quite well, but the BMW is going to be stuck on the outside for the next turn. This all helps the Lexus. The black Lexus up ahead. If these guys can keep on fighting, it could give him a chance to get away if he didn't try and carry a bit too much speed. End up with a wheel out in the sand. BMW is going to come flying past. The King Cobra is wanting to join in as well, and now we're going 3 wide towards a final corner that they've probably only ever driven around 4 or 5 times, I think, at this stage. So yeah, they all make it through though. Amazingly, everyone's going for different lines at this stage. Everyone's trying to cut back on each other and seeing what line they can get the best possible advantage. Lexus trying to get back at the BMW. The King Cobra's up alongside, and now we're running down towards the incredibly tight first corner. 3 wide, near enough. The BMW and King Cobra sweep around both sides of the Chevy. Chevy cuts back to the inside, gets the pair of them once more to keep his position. The Lexus has dropped to, mid of this group is fighting, though, with the King Cobra. Still, the M3 is looking. Somebody's out in the weeds on the outside. I think the Lexus did some... Oh, both Lexuses did some exploring on the outside. The BMW could not quite find a way past the Chevy as of yet. At the front, and it was a Pontiac GTO Judge that was leading the way. I'd kept him honest through large parts of the race. Pontiac incredibly fast in a straight line. My Mustang much faster through the corners, but I could never quite do anything to get back past him. Amazingly, the Range Rover was clinging on in third really, really well to us up here. The way we did the scoring for this race is the races were 10 minutes long, and it was the last complete lap that would count for the victor. So yeah, the GTO would take victory. This group was still fighting right up until the very end as the BMW to the inside of the King Cobra, but does overrun the final corner ever so slightly. The Ferrari cuts back on the Lexus to get a position, with the Lexus having a very, very big slide. The King Cobra couldn't quite make his move stick. Is carrying a lot of speed though down the start-finish straight. It's to the inside, but is just a little bit too late as the BMW would cross the line ahead of him. Fantastic mid-pack battle these lots were having. for our second race, we'd go to the Nürburgring GP circuit, this time going for a more sensible, sort of gridded up start, and worked much better, as we now run down towards, well, the first corner is now slightly more open than it was with 5 wide, and towards this first corner. 5 wide into a corner that we have no idea quite how it is going to drive. There was a little bit of bumping, a bit of paint was swapped, as you can see by the side of my car, and a few other vehicles, but we made it through without anyone having a major off, which is pretty damn impressive. We made it all through the very, very slow chicane as well. That was quite a scary prospect, with everyone trying to go sort of too wide, and it is a really tight chicane when you're especially when you're attacking it from this particular direction. I was trying to fend off an Aston Martin, my Mustang, pretty decent straight line speed in the Ford and good handling as well. Great overall car. Mustang was immediately on the back of the Pontiac. Once more, I was getting exactly the same sight for the second race in a row. The M3 sweeps around the outside of me. Fairlady Z has got mega speed to get past the pair of us. I was out a little bit wide, and yeah, just that being slightly compromised cost me 2 places. Civic very sideways coming down the S's. The Fairlady Z still on the inside. The Corolla was having a look, but that's quite a fast section, and no one was quite sure how much grip their cars would have, but we all kept things on the road. It was, a frantic opening lap. Up ahead, we would learn of another danger of racing in reverse. The Ferrari Testarossa was towards the very front of the grid. However, running across the curbs, especially in the final couple of corners here, there's just horrendous curves, because I guess the way the curbs are serrated, when you run over them normally it's okay, but when you're running over them in this direction, it just bounces the car up in the air, and the Ferrari was the first to fall victim of him, spinning him around and dropping him down the order. Fairlady Z was a ridiculously fast car, this one. We saw how quick the Pontiac was at Laguna as the Aston Martin was recovering from an off at the first corner. The Aston Martin had a wheel on the curb, and that curb, while not quite as vicious, was still enough to put the Aston Martin just sideways enough to see it in the tyre wall. We saw how fast the GTO was down the straight at Laguna. The Fairlady Z was even faster around here as the Pontiac couldn't quite get it turned, wheel on the grass, and the Nissan would be clean past to go and try and chase down the lead 3. Yeah, that's a lot of straight line speed, and it was looking relatively controllable as well through the corners. Unfortunately, the curbs would strike the Nissan as well as he was trying to chase down the Volvo up ahead. This time on the very final corner, goes to the inside. It is a huge two-wheel moment, tries to catch it, just the sort of sim steering, flicks the car back around, and that would see the Nissan dumped down the order. These curbs were very, very nasty. Incredibly nasty. You had to keep off them at all times. There was once more a pretty damn good mid-pack battle going on here. There was a Fast and Furious Charger. Skyline was in the mix. Toyota Corolla was actually faring pretty well. The Black Lexus was here, and the Aston Martin, all in a big group. The M3 was fighting with the Dodge at the front of it as dirt was being kicked up from everybody. The Skyline, not quite sure where to take that corner, bounces it across the curb. That makes him slow off the turn. Corolla will pounce and get the position towards the next corner. Charger can't quite get it stopped and goes off exploring, giving the position back to the M3. The Skyline's once again trying to stick his nose in the middle. The BMW comes across and gets a bit of a bump from the Corolla through there, but they're all okay. The Skyline's profited the most, making 2 positions through that section. Still, we go too wide. Civic gets very, very sideways up ahead. Everybody being very aware of these curbs and staying well clear of the nastiest ones. The Corolla around the outside of the BMW at the final corner, trying to give chase to that is Skyline. The Corolla was incredibly quick in a straight line, as well as they head down towards the new turn 1. We had a Peugeot 205 in the mix, always good to see a 205 in these races. He was fighting with an Aston Martin and Mazda RX-8 as they head down this back straight. This track was perhaps not quite as drastic a change as Laguna. Is still quite an interesting circuit to run in the reverse direction, especially this corner coming up here. The downhill S's are completely blind. you turn into the kind of the second part of it without really knowing where the track is going. So that was a rather scary experience through there, as the Aston Martin finds out with running wide and bouncing into the wall. Again, we saw a fair few cars off at that part of the track, and then trying to get it stopped for the hairpin. The RX-8 would just try and carry a bit too much speed and end up giving the position to the 205 as well. At the front, it was a relatively calm race for the Camaro. He would hold on to the lead. Was ever so fractionally, I think, being caught by the Volvo towards the end, but it was a very, very small margin. Yeah, it was a good race from the Camaro, and it was definitely an interesting track. While you haven't quite got, the corkscrew running in the wrong direction, there was still plenty of stuff to be worrying about around here. I was in a mighty tussle for third, again fighting with that GTO. The Pontiac, of course, very quick down the straights. However, my Mustang was making huge swathes of time through these corners. On the final lap, I knew I had to get an overtake done somewhere. Both of us were actually catching the 2 leaders as well towards the end of the race. I knew I had to get a decent gap as well before we came to the straight. I got to the inside of the Pontiac, and fortunately for me, in his haste to try and get a cutback on the Mustang, he got a bit too greedy with the curbs, bounced the car across it, spun the GTO around, and that would give me the third place. You see how far I was trying to stay away from that final curve just to make sure not to do anything silly. And I wasn't the only one having an interesting final lap. This midfield group, not quite as spectacular as it had been at Laguna, but there's still pretty damn good battles going on. The Aston Martin had a little bit of an off, and that was to give the Corolla a chance to get back past. Corolla goes to the inside across. There's a fairly large sort of mound on the inside of that corner. Can't quite get the move to work. Aston Martin's all sort of sideways. I think he may have put a wheel on the outside curb, and that might have assisted the car. Again, as everyone's going that little bit more defensive, a little bit more aggressive on the final lap, Aston Martin tried across the curb, but it wasn't really a good idea. It's 3, 4, who knows how many cars trying to fit in to the final corner. The Corolla's out wide, gets the best run of the lot of them as the BMW can't get the car off the turn. The Aston Martin not massively fast in a straight line. The Corolla would outdrag the RX-8 up towards the line. An interesting final couple of corners there for the Toyota. And on to our final race, perhaps the scariest prospect of them all. It was to go to Spa. Now, our new turn 1 for this circuit is horrendously tight. As we come to, this is a really, really very narrow, very nasty section of track. The Corolla not quite getting stopped in time, having to take to the inside of the course there. Yeah, that is not a nice first corner, especially when you're not quite expecting it, because as you're further back in the field, you can't even see where the corner is. It's just a sea of cars ahead of you. And then these turns, you're approaching them from the wrong direction, and no one is quite sure just how much speed you can get away with. Taking through here, the Toyota and Skyline are rubbing paint through some very, very quick corners. Now we're up to another big braking zone that is a rather blind corner coming down here again on this opening lap. No one's quite sure how brave dare you be in trying to get the car stopped through this section. Everybody making it through though. There was no cars off gallivanting into the sand. It's it's a rather tough, especially on the very opening lap, rather tough trying to judge your braking points. Corolla getting himself in trouble again. Wheels on the curb was not a good idea. Spat the car sideways. He did manage to recover it. A little laggy bump between the Alfa and the 205. 205 twitches all over the road, but does manage to recover it. The Toyota very much boxed in with an Aston Martin ahead, a Lexus alongside, and a Bentley right behind. Not quite the place you really want to be as we sweep through these very fast corners. The 205 goes exploring out wide. The Corolla has, I think, another issue with the curb that'll dump him all the way down the order. Yeah, running a little bit wide is not a particular good idea in these races. But of course, the biggest, scariest challenge of them all at this track, Eau Rouge is now taken completely blind and downhill. I was the first one, having started from pole and got a good getaway. I was the first one to tackle this corner going in the wrong direction. It is really, really rather weird heading down that corner, and yeah, slightly terrifying because it is a very, very quick corner. as the cars fly downhill. The Bentley was chasing down the Lexus. Unfortunately, not quite everyone made it through Eau Rouge without having an incident, but most of the leaders would get through cleanly. The Bentley trying to fight a way past the Lexus. Of course, big four-wheel drive Bentley, plenty of power, not the greatest through the corners, but could outdrag the Lexus down towards our now incredibly nasty turn 1. The Lexus is going to fight back on the inside, but can't quite make it stick. Bentley running a little bit wide and is going to be a little slower off of the corner. Does get the vehicle turned though. They're ridiculously tight corners when being taken from this angle, and this was going to be our first time approaching these corners at kind of with trying to push that car that little bit more when you haven't quite got traffic directly ahead of you. And as you see, everyone, I think almost everyone without fail in this group would run a tad wide. You had a little bit more confidence in the car, and you didn't have vehicles beside you and directly ahead of you, so there was a little bit more bravery, and yeah, everybody went off exploring. Here the field would spread out relatively quickly. There were a few groups battling, but it certainly wasn't like the other two races that we've seen. That can sometimes just be the nature of Spa in general. This Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo were having a good fight, and this was another thing that we did see a fair amount of throughout all of the tracks, to be honest, but especially in the opening laps. Cars trying to carry more and more speed on the way out of corners and just not quite getting it right. It ended up with the vehicle out in the grass as we come once more to Eau Rouge. Unfortunately, the replay cameras struggle to really capture just how terrifying it is down here. A selection of ghost vehicles along the one of the start-finish straights essentially, and then up towards the final corner. This turn's not much where you are approaching it at a much higher speed, that final turn, than you would kind of normally, but it's not too bad around there. It was inevitable we would at some point have cars try and go too wide, heading up towards Eau Rouge as a Sierra and Volvo were absolutely neck and neck down the straight, although as they go under brakes, the Volvo left it a little bit too late, realised he wasn't going to turn in time, and thought it was better to take the rallycross option. Definitely much safer way of doing that. The Lexus up ahead got a massive slide on the way out. I don't know if that was curb assisted or whether he just lost the back end, pushing the car too hard, and the Sierra would make the most of that opportunity as they come to the final corner. Again though, Sierra trying to jump on the power too soon, and that just gives you a bit of understeer. You just end up out far too wide. The Lexus, much better run through the corner, would get himself back alongside and ahead, although he is stuck on the outside as we come down towards our first corner. Lexus tries to make it stick the long way round. If you can keep it there, you can sometimes make that manoeuvre work, although the Lexus was on such a tight line that he couldn't get any speed out of the corner. And in all of that, the Volvo that had rallycrossed his way down Eau Rouge was now back into that group. Further back, there's another group of three cars fighting for position. The Corolla was trying to fend off Lexus and the Camaro, and the Corolla had successfully managed to fend them off through the first couple of corners. The Camaro had some mighty straight line speed. He went chasing after the Toyota, but Lexus was better through the corners and could carry a little bit more speed through these next couple of turns as the Camaro and Toyota are side by side. I think they rub doors ever so slightly, and the Lexus will say thank you very much and drive through the middle of them. That is a fantastic opportunistic overtake up the middle of the two cars, and that is at some serious speed down that section of track. Unfortunately for the Bentley, he would have it off and get himself stuck in the sand trap, recovering back onto the road. Yeah, that's a very, very quick part of the track to go three wide, kind of diving through the middle. Unfortunately for the poor Lexus, he too would then suffer the curse of trying to put too much power down and end up in the dirt. I was leading the way, but gradually being caught by the King Cobra. We were pretty even throughout the course of the track. The Cobra was just much braver coming down Eau Rouge. I was focusing on trying not to make any silly mistakes, but I knew I was going to have to be braver next time around. As Skyline had caught the pair, as Skyline was very, very quick around this circuit. The Mustang trying to find a way back past as we run into the final corner. Does manage to draw alongside and get a better run out of the turn, but it is to no avail. The Nissan had so much more straight line speed than we did and would go chasing after me down towards the first corner. I was going to hold the Skyline out wide, hoping to force him to take the really tight line, make him slow off the turn. I did to an extent, but it wasn't enough. The Skyline had far too much speed for me to do anything about it. I then get stuck on the outside. I wasn't really quite sure how much speed I could take through here. Being on the outside, it didn't work. I went off exploring through the scenery. Managed to keep it out of the wall. I threw a tyre at the Mustang as well. But yeah, just about kept it all together. Not the ideal line. You definitely can't take as much speed when you're out on that line. But it's a line I'd never come across before. When doing this race, you just had no idea quite what you were faced with and what you were going to have to deal with. I kept it all together though and got my car back on track in second place, and that is to how the order would be as we were on the final lap. I've got to show from a cockpit view as we run up towards Eau Rouge. The skyline was just too quick and too far ahead. I had the Mustang right behind me and I knew I had to be braver coming up to this corner for the final time. It is a tiny dam on the brakes as you chuck the car through here, and a good handling vehicle like this Mustang, you can take incredible speeds on the way down Eau Rouge. The stupid ghost cars are annoying on the replay, but yeah, Eau Rouge is a phenomenal corner. When you get it right, going the wrong way down Eau Rouge is about the most satisfying corner. It's better than going up Eau Rouge correctly. Going down Eau Rouge is just... Go and try it. It's absolutely incredible. Going the wrong way down that corner. Yeah, it was really rather good fun driving these circuits. It's just a completely different challenge of corners. Well, yes, you know, you might know the circuit. The corners all behave differently. They worry about different lines and curbs. And there's so much more to think about. And we had a hell of a lot of good racing as well with these cars at these circuits that everyone was trying to learn and deal with all of the difficulties. Proved to be a lot of fun, and definitely try driving around Spa the wrong way. Eau Rouge is just phenomenal. The corkscrew is pretty impressive climbing up it, but going down Eau Rouge is really something rather spectacular, and I would very much recommend that you give it a go. However, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.